These are two new Legion laptops for 2026, and interestingly, they are identically spec'd, sort of, but they're packaged differently. Not from an actual packaging standpoint, I'm talking more about physical design and some of the other features that come along with it. You see, the first one is the Legion 5A. This is actually a really interesting laptop because it's designed for those, who want to explore the idea of gaming without breaking the bank. I wish I had more table space. So that's the Legion 5A. Now the other laptop that we have over here is the Legion 7A. And this is a totally different package compared to the 5A because this is Legion's response to those who are seeking an ultra slim profile without compromising on some of the premium features that you get with higher end gaming laptops. So things like better build quality, better screen, and of course, from a form factor standpoint, this has to be super portable. And I think they've kind of nailed it. This thing is super slim. So I thought it'd be interesting to share the differences both from a physical standpoint and performance standpoint between the Legion 5A and the Legion 7A if you're shopping for a new Legion laptop. And I want to thank Legion and AMD for partnering with us on this video, just because both these laptops feature AMD's new Ryzen Gorgon Point CPUs, and they're paired with identically spec GPUs, although the power levels are slightly different. I'll get to why later in the video. The first thing to address here is the price gap between these two laptops. The Legion 5A starts at $1,600, while the 7A comes in just a little north of $2,000. That's roughly $400 difference right out of the gate. Now, one thing to note here is that the Legion 7A that I have over here is not the base configuration. It's spec'd with the upgraded Ryzen AI 9 HX370, which adds another $200 over the base model. That comes with the Ryzen AI 7 450 with 8 less threads. The Legion 5A that I have over here is also spec'd higher than the base model. So this thing comes with the Ryzen AI 9 465. So you might be asking yourselves what's actually different between these processors. Well, they're both built on AMD's Zen 5 architecture, so it's the same Gorgon Point chips, but the HX470 brings 4 additional threads to the table. And that's largely thanks to the extra energy efficient Zen 5 C cores. So the question is, do they actually make a tangible difference? Well, it depends on what you're doing. You see, in synthetic multi-core workloads, like Cinebench, for example, the 7A pulls ahead by around 5 to 9% in both balanced and performance modes. And that's with the 5A drawing notably more power, up to 17% more in performance mode compared to the 7A. So on pure efficiency, the 7A is clearly the strong chip. Now, if we flip over to single core performance, that gap essentially vanishes. I mean, there's less than 1% between them. So for anything that's not heavily threaded, those extra cores just aren't a factor. In real world rendering like Blender and Houdini, the 7A is consistently about 4 to 7% faster. Again, it's not as dramatic as you would think. In creator focus apps like Photoshop, the 5A surprisingly takes the lead here by about 2 to 3%. We found it a bit odd, but it was consistent across both modes, and we ran it multiple times. In DaVinci Resolve Studio and Adobe Premiere Pro, the gap between these two chips basically disappears. We're talking well less than 2% in most cases, which actually kind of makes sense since most of these apps are GPU accelerated and they both share the same RTX 5060 laptop GPU. So yes, the HX470 is technically the faster chip, but only in workloads that actually use all those threads. For everyday creative tasks, you're looking at a negligible real-world difference. Now, if we look at build quality and design, right away you'll notice some subtle differences between the 7A and the 5A. Both these laptops share the exact same DNA. As you're all aware, Legion is known for their simple and stealthy chassis IDs, and here you basically have the Legion logo that's engraved on the top lid right in the middle. They're not RGB lit, and honestly, I do miss the corner placement from the older generations, but I do respect the minimalistic direction that they've taken here. It's still pretty sleek, it's an understated package, and it doesn't scream gamery. I mean, that's the whole point, right? You want something that can easily, blend in a cafe setting or a lecture hall or even a business meeting. So yeah, these things definitely checkmark that. Color-wise, the Legion 5A comes in Glacier White and Eclipse Black, which is what I have over here, while the 7A gives you the Glacier White model, but it also comes in this really cool Nebula colorway, which is kind of like a dark purplish tone. One thing I will flag though is that if you do decide to go for the black model, just be prepared to wipe it down constantly. I mean, this thing is a huge fingerprint magnet, but things start to diverge in build quality. The 5A has an aluminum top panel, but the rest of the chassis is sort of your typical ABS plastic materials. It's totally fine for the price, but the 7A is a full aluminum chassis, and they're essentially sort of pushing the aluminum even further by giving the edges sort of like a brushed aluminum finish that contrasts really well with the white model. The 7A is also thinner than the 5A, despite it being bigger since it features a 16-inch display versus the 15-inch display on the 5A. We're talking 0.79 inches on the 5A versus 0.67 inches on the 7A. And because the 7A uses a full aluminum chassis, you might expect it to weigh more, but it actually weighs less than the Legion 5A. It's 3.97 pounds versus 4.12 pounds. It's not massive, but every ounce counts when you're throwing this thing into a backpack along with all the accessories that you use every single day. So it's definitely something to keep in mind. Moving on to the interior space. The layout is pretty similar across both chassis. You get a full-size keyboard with a numpad, and I really appreciate the extra room for the full-size arrow keys. If you use Excel a ton, this is certainly a nice touch. Now, the switches are identical on both laptops. They feature 1.6 millimeters of key travel, and the caps are recessed by 0.3 millimeters for that extra layer of comfort. And they feel fantastic. There's no wobble, there's no play, they just feel really solid with great tactile feedback. Now, both the 5A and the 7A come with multi-zone RGB lighting, and there are some tasteful RGB effects built in if you're into that kind of flair. As for the trackpad, this is, again, one of those areas where you'll feel the price difference. So if we start with the 5A, it uses a mylar surface, while the 7A upgrades to a glass surface. And the difference really comes down to smoothness when you're navigating within Windows, and it's immediately noticeable. Now, let's shift over to the port setup. And this is actually a really interesting comparison because if we start with the 5A, it's surprisingly, for the price, very generous. So you're getting 3 full-size USB Type-A ports, 2 USB 4 Type-C ports, HDMI 2.1, a headphone jack, and yes, you also get a RJ45 Ethernet jack built right in. So you don't need any dongles for this thing. Most of them are positioned at the back for easier cable management. The 7A, on the other hand, it makes some compromises to maintain its slim profile. So you're down to just 2 USB Type-A ports, a couple of USB Type-C ports, HDMI 2.1, and a full-size SD card reader, which is a nice touch for creators especially. I will say, I'm going to give Legion credit for still including the physical webcam kill switch on both these laptops. But there is a bit of a head scratcher. You know, the Type-A ports, for example, on both these laptops are still Gen 1 at 5 gigabits per second rather than Gen 2 10 gigabits per second. So on a $2,000 laptop and a $1,600 laptop, I just feel like it's a missed opportunity. Now, moving on to the displays. Both the 5A and the 7A are sporting Legion's Pure Sight OLED displays. Now, the 5A comes with a 15.3-inch 16:10 panel at Quad HD Plus resolution running at 165 Hz, while the 7A steps it up to a slightly larger 16-inch panel at the same resolution, but they bumped up the refresh rate to 240 Hz. Now, in practice, the higher refresh rate makes a noticeable difference, especially in gaming. It feels faster and smoother, and once you get to experience that, it's kind of hard to go back to something like 120 Hz display or even a 60 Hz panel. In terms of image quality, I don't need to particularly introduce OLED panels. They deliver rich, vibrant colors. You get those inky blacks, covers 100% of the DCI-P3 color gamut, and it comes with really good color accuracy out of the box. Now, I did notice something interesting from my brightness test on both these laptops. So the 5A actually edges out the 7A, coming in close to 510 nits of peak SDR brightness versus 490 nits on the 7A. It's not a massive gap, but it's worth noting since you might expect the pricier model to win in every category, but not this time. Now, about gaming performance. While both these laptops share the exact same RTX 5060 laptop GPU, their power levels are slightly different. So the Legion 5A can run up to 109 watts in performance mode, while the Legion 7A tops out at 95 watts. And I'm going to show you how both of them perform in balanced and performance modes. And honestly, the results really speak for themselves. If we look at a few titles over here across both 1200p and 1600p resolutions, the gap between the 5A and the 7A is basically negligible in every single one. If you look at Cyberpunk 2077, It's within 2% of each other at both resolutions. CS2, the 5A actually edges the 7A slightly at 1600p. It's most likely due to the fact that it chugs a bit more power. Rainbow Six Siege, again, the 5A holds its own, trading blows within 2 to 3%. Same goes with Baldur's Gate 3, and that's really the story here. When the GPU is doing the heavy lifting at 1600p, for example, the chip differences between these two laptops become almost irrelevant for gaming. The 5A, it keeps up, if not beats the 7A in some cases. Now, both the 5A and the 7A share Legion's cold front hypercooling system. So on paper, they're working with the same thermal solution. But the results tell an interesting story. On the GPU side, both laptops land in virtually the same place under full load, within a fraction of a degree of each other in performance mode. So the GPU is well managed on both laptops. No concerns there. The CPU, on the other hand, is where things diverge. In balanced mode, the 7A is already running 10 degrees hotter than the 5A. Push both into performance mode and the gap narrows. But the 7A hits 100 degrees flat, while the 5A sits around 94 degrees Celsius. That 7A slimmer chassis is working really hard to manage that extra CPU headroom. When we look at noise profiles, both laptops are essentially identical across every scenario. Whether you're doing light load tasks like web browsing or under gaming load in performance mode, they're both relatively quiet. Now, battery life is one area where the Legion 7A pulls ahead more convincingly in everyday use. It packs a slightly larger 84 watt-hour battery versus 80 watt-hours on the Legion 5A. And honestly, the bigger factor here is the chip itself. Those energy-efficient Zen 5C cores and the HX 470 do a lot of the heavy lifting when you're away from the wall. And you can see that reflected in the results. So under light load, the 7A lasted about 40 minutes longer than the Legion 5A. And when you stream a YouTube video, that gap grows to almost a full hour difference. Switching over to gaming though, it's pretty much a dead tie. Both machines top out at under 2 hours, which is pretty standard for any gaming laptop pushing these kinds of specs. So I hope I was able to paint the differences between the Legion 7A and the Legion 5A. The bottom line is, if gaming is your primary use case, just save the money and go with the Legion 5A. The performance difference simply doesn't justify the extra $400. But if you want a more premium, well-rounded package like better build quality, better battery life, more CPU headroom for heavier workloads, the 7A earns its price tag. These are two great laptops from Legion. They're of course going to be different buyers with different needs. Thanks so much for watching. I'm Ibor with Canucks, and I'll talk to you guys in the next one.